Thank you very much indeed, Tim. Next up is Will Higham from London First, talking about trade.
Thank you very much. I should probably just say just to introduce myself, London First is a business membership organisation with the mission to make London the best place in the world in which to do business. So we work with a lot of companies, large and small, across London. I hope that informs what I'm going to say. So trade. Why is it so important? Britain, as we look ahead from this point, does not sit on a massive wealth of natural resources. Our main resources are talent, which finds its expression in exports and in international trade most of all. It's hard to imagine a UK that could just exist looking in on itself, either in terms of the resources and food we need, or in terms of simply surviving as a sort of platform economy of schooling, hospitals, and getting by. The truth is that we need to trade to give full talent to our full expression to our talent, to bring in the money that we desperately need. Britain is thirsty for capital, and to be able to acquire the resources we need. And also, if you look around, the most vibrant, fun parts of the country are often the bits where you can see companies, individuals, startups and firms that are working into Europe and into the world in a kind of ferment of new ideas and innovation. It's good fun, in other words. The task ahead is huge. I mean, we were the only business group really to go into the referendum registered to campaign for. We campaigned hard to remain in Europe. Immediately after, 2 days after, we were all on the page of what is the best we can do from here. No one wanted to go back and sort of refight any referendum or wish it were otherwise. We had to work through the sort of stages of grief over a weekend and get firmly back into what can we do now. But on the other hand, it's important right now, I think, in the political debate, you hear a lot of voices trying to shut down legitimate concerns as unpatriotic pessimism. And I don't think that's a sort of useful or pleasant bit of our politics. The truth is that there is a really tough task ahead. When we were fighting ahead of the referendum, we did not join the chorus that said, if we vote out, everything will go to the dogs over the summer. It'll be like a zombie invasion. The risk was always different. The risk was always a short-term lack of confidence, which we seem to be managing our way through. And then the risk is a long-term tailing off of investment. And what it looks like, just to give you a picture talking to companies, is you'll have a management board sitting around. They've all got family around. They enjoy the UK. It's a vibrant place to live. The sort of decision it comes to is in a few years' time, however painful it is, we're going to move to Dublin or we're going to invest elsewhere. It isn't a sudden sort of exodus. It isn't a flood. What it is, well, let me give you an example. I was at Labour conference about whenever it was 3 weeks ago, and I was listening to a couple of people on the kind of the centre of the Labour Party, as it used to be called, what Blairites, as they're now called, and they're saying, how many years are we now going to come back and have this same conversation about about the Labour Party? And the answer is there were fewer of them coming back each year. They were having the same conversation, but there were fewer people having it, and that's what it sort of begins to look like with Britain and trading if we don't get it exactly right ahead. We're not going to hear a sudden rush to the door. There's going to be fewer people saying, we're still here. So let me move on to the details of trade and what's ahead, with all the provisos that there are plenty of unknowns. First thing we think of, I think, most of us, when we're talking about trade, is goods, things that we sort of make here, stamp, and sort of made in Britain and sent to another country. Now, one of the things that's really emerging, and you may have seen some sort of interesting stuff in The Sun and other newspapers this week as a debate, is the customs union as part of the EU. So there are many, many sort of chapters of legislation that you have to sort of take on to become an EU member. In the divorce process, you sort of have to divest yourself of them just as you would sign up to join. And one of them is the customs union, which simply means things travel freely, objects around the EU. Now, we can go into more detail about what that means, but that's becoming politically very, very vexed about whether we have assumed voting out that we remain in that or not. And I think when you look at the goods side of it, there's two things that really, really come out. One is that manufacturers have increasingly sort of built supply chains the whole way across Europe. So objects will pass from one country to another in different points of assembling before a final product is made. So it becomes very hard to say what British manufacture is outside that. The other is that through the EU, a lot of the debate ahead of the referendum was, do we want, and this is in very broad terms, to trade with the EU, which we see as a sort of diminishing market, or do we want to trade with the rest of the world, which we find very exciting? It was a sort of Brexiteer argument. In fact, a lot of trade agreements have been brokered through the EU with other parts of the world, in particular Canada, South Korea, a lot of North Africa, South Africa, and Central America. So we have to think carefully about whether we want to leave so much of the EU that would also leave those treaties behind to have the freedom to make free trade agreements with other unknown countries in the future. And I think that's the dilemma that the Liam Fox department really embodies. And we have to remember that amidst all the rhetoric, we use the EU to route to the rest of the world. And we also have to ask ourselves the hard question about, in the current political climate, the climate which Brexit is part of, which you can see in America with Trump, which you can see across the rest of the EU, what is the appetite from the rest of the world for making trade deals? Even Hillary Clinton, who was a champion of trade deals, has gone into this American election lukewarm at best about them. So these are the hard questions we need to ask. It's not unpatriotic, it's not pessimistic, it's just about trying to find the way in which we keep and grow trade in Britain. And I'll just end up by talking about the services sector. As I say, when we talk about trade, we often, I think about boxes that pass across borders and are traded, goods in other words. Services is a huge part of our economy. 80%, I suspect many of you here will be looking to go into some form of the services sector. Financial services, we've heard mentioned. Passporting may have come out as an issue, which is the right to do business across the EU from London that has helped, and other parts of the UK, which has helped the UK get its role. But equally with sectors, in the service industry, we have to think a huge amount about, and this is the vexed word of the year, immigration. Because the truth is that if you talk to London businesses, and not just big businesses, in the legal services, in financial services, but startups like tech companies in East London, you'll find a huge amount of talent flowing back and forth. So if you go to a startup in, say, in Shoreditch, you will find perhaps, of the 70 staff, 30 are from other parts of the EU, flying back at some weekends to go and see their family, bringing a special talent here, and working with UK people who have developed their talents in other parts of Europe and other parts of the world. So the flow of people is inseparable from the success of the service industries. And I think if we could do one thing in this difficult debate, which we are determined to get the best out of, it would be to start to break down the category immigration a bit. Because when we look at one of our huge successful service sectors at the minute is higher education. People coming here to learn is an export in terms of our economy. People coming here to hone their skills in highly specialized service jobs adds, and we also do the same and send people to other countries. So starting to break down what we mean by immigration and ask tough questions of it rather than treating it as a single banner fact is one of the ways we'll pick our way through all of this. So, and in fact, if I could just end on one thing, if there was one thing I think the UK government could do now to show that it was looking ahead and entering the negotiations in the best faith and not treating it as a sort of zero-sum game with 27 other nations, all of whom have a right of veto, I think it would be just to say, as that act of good faith, that people who are now working here, living here and studying here, under the expectation that Britain was a member of the EU, we're not going to treat that as a trading card or anything else. We're just going to say that is done. We're going to, as a moral issue, as creating business certainty, we're just going to say we're going to leave that as it is and not try and trade people. Anyway, so I think when we look ahead, trade is important. Without it, we cannot pay our way as a nation. We cannot have the vibrancy we want in our economy. We cannot have the aspirational jobs. We do have to try and get the best out of the new situation. On goods, that does mean looking at the customs union, and in particular, I think it also means understanding the complexity of modern supply chains. And in services, it really does mean some form of movement of labour that underpins the service sectors. So much unknown, much ahead. We'll do our best to make it work. But neither mindless pessimism nor optimism will get us through. It's a deeply complex issue.